Hello, you're watching the Daily Roundup by People's Dispatch, where we bring you some of the top stories from around the world. Let's take a look at the headlines. Brazil election goes to second round. Crucial Yemeni ceasefire expires. Thousands protest in UK against rising inflation. Health worker dies after contracting Ebola in Uganda. The Brazilian presidential election is headed for a runoff second round after no candidate managed to get 50% of the votes. The two main candidates, ex-President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and incumbent Jair Bolsonaro, received 48.42% and 43.20% respectively. Other candidates in the fray returned with single-digit figures and are out of contention. The results were based on 99.97% of the total votes counted. The Superior Electoral Court, TSE, of Brazil said that the second round will be held on October 30. On Sunday, elections were also held for governors of the 27 provinces, 583 deputies and one-third of the Senate in the Brazilian parliament, as well as state legislatures. Some of the governor elections will also have a second round. Following the conclusion of the first round, the widely popular leftist leader Lula spoke to his supporters at around 10 p.m. and thanked them for their support. He expressed confidence in winning the election. He termed the second round as only an extension or an overtime, using a football analogy. He further noted that the second round provides him with a chance to engage in a one-on-one debate with the president and question him over his lies regarding his tenure and the progress and development he claimed happened during that time. Bolsonaro spoke to his supporters as well after losing the first round to Lula and told them that he will continue to show the people his best side. The feuding sides in Yemen have failed to reach an agreement to extend the countrywide ceasefire by the October 2 deadline, the United Nations said on Sunday, October 2. The UN-mediated ceasefire, which was first agreed in April this year, led to a significant cessation of violence and hostilities. It provided major and much-needed humanitarian and economic relief to millions of Yemeni civilians caught up in the middle of the civil war and Saudi-led foreign intervention. The ceasefire had been renewed twice since the beginning, and UN officials in Yemen, along with rights groups, were urging the parties to extend it once again. Following the failure, the UN Special Envoy to Yemen, Hans Grundberg, released a statement regretting the development and calling on all parties to refrain from acts of provocation as talks regarding the extension are continued. The UN envoy said he has submitted another proposal to the parties in Yemen with the aim of not only extending the ceasefire but also broadening its scope. The new proposal includes clauses such as payment of civil servants' salaries and pensions, the opening of specific roads in Taiz and other governorates, additional destinations for flights to and from Sana'a airport, and unhindered entry of fuel ships into Hodeidah port. It further calls for strengthening the de-escalation mechanisms, commitments from the parties for the release of detainees, and framework for negotiations for a permanent ceasefire, together with a renewed political process that includes all parties and factions. Meanwhile, earlier on Saturday, the Houthis had said that talks to extend the ceasefire had reached a dead end. They had reiterated their long-standing calls to fully open the Sana'a airport and lift the blockade on the Hodeidah port. Moving on to the third story, the UK witnessed massive demonstrations on Saturday, October 1, against the Tory government for failing to tackle the ongoing cost of living crisis. According to reports, over 100,000 people participated in protests across the country called by the Enough is Enough campaign. Protest demonstrations were held in over 50 cities, including London, Manchester, Liverpool, and Glasgow. Working-class sections across Europe have been organizing protests demanding concrete solutions from governments to tackle the cost of living crisis and soaring inflation in food and fuel prices. Due to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war and sanctions imposed by the European Union and the United States on Russian gas exports to Europe, energy prices have skyrocketed in European countries. Profiteering by multinational energy producers and suppliers amid this crisis has worsened the situation. Trade unions and leftist organizations the next day participated in a joint protest called People's Assembly Against Austerity outside the venue of the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham. The protesters expressed solidarity with postal and rail workers who are on strike against poor pay and work conditions. Members of all major trade unions in the country, including the National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers or RMT, Communication Workers Union, the CWU, and Junior Doctors Movement took part in the demonstrations. Additionally, political parties like the Communist Party of Britain, the CPB, and the Young Communist League, YCL Britain, expressed solidarity and participated in the protests. The Enough is Enough campaign in the UK has been started by trade unions and community organizations to fight against the cost of living crisis and to defend the rights and dignity of working class sections in the country. The campaign is being supported by unions including the Communication Workers Union and RMT and community organizations including ACON UK and Right to Food campaign, among others. The campaign has put forth a set of demands to tackle the cost of living crisis, which include a real pay rise, slashing of energy bills, ending food poverty, provision of decent and affordable homes for all, and taxing the rich. And finally, the first health worker has died in Uganda in the latest Ebola outbreak, the country's health minister said on Saturday, October 1. The deceased has been identified as 37-year-old Tanzanian Dr. Muhammad Ali. He had tested positive for the disease on September 26 and died while receiving treatment. He was reportedly infected with the Sudanese strain of the virus, which currently has no vaccine or cure. 5 other health workers have contracted the disease, including doctors, an anesthesiologist, and a medical student. The disease reportedly broke out in the country on September 20, giving rise to fears of a disastrous health crisis among the country's 45 million strong population. Last week, the Health Ministry had reported 35 confirmed cases with 7 deaths. The latest outbreak of the disease has resulted in the World Health Organization and United Nations arranging for medical supplies and medical experts to be sent to Uganda to assist the doctors and public health officials to tackle and control the outbreak. WHO officials have meanwhile expressed confidence in Uganda's ability to bring the outbreak under control owing to its previous expertise in tackling other strains of the virus in the recent past. 3 years ago, Uganda was home to an outbreak of the more common Zaire strain of the disease. That outbreak was linked to cases which were first discovered in neighboring DRC or Democratic Republic of the Congo. The last time the deadliest Sudan strain was found in Uganda was 22 years ago. At the time, 425 people were found to be infected with the virus, out of which 226 people died. And that's all we have for today's episode. For more such stories, visit our website peoplesdispatch.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram.